Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Now, my first conversation surrounds the state of coral reefs and ecosystems as the world continues to warm. Coral Reef Watch for the Caribbean is predicting severe coral bleaching throughout our region from July to October. A bulletin was released in June by the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology using Coral Reef Watch's 4-month outlook. Well, to have a discussion on the impact of warming waters on coral reefs and by extension the death of coral reefs, what impact that has for all of us, I'm joined by Ms. Katrina Can-Roberts. She's an environmental advocate and author. She's with us via Zoom. Hello, Ms. Can-Roberts. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Keaton. Thank you so very much for having me this morning.
Well, it's good to see you once more. I hope the little mermaid in you is still very happy. And Ms. Can,
oh, yes, definitely.
Ms. Can-Roberts, the El Nino event, where heat is being pushed to the surface of the Pacific Ocean, is having impacts throughout the world. We've already had 2 of the hottest days on records since they began being taken since the 1970s. What is this impact of the El Nino event having upon our coral reefs, not just within the Caribbean, but globally?
So it's very important to know that coral reefs are a very specific ecosystem, right? And tropical coral reefs, they're only like a really, really small amount of surface area over the entire reef. All of these systems have been built over time, and the specific needed, like the environments that they need to survive include warm water, clean water, high nutrient water, right? But not over a certain balance. So once that balance has shifted with the temperatures going up, it causes the structures within the coral to actually reject everything. So basically coral, there are 2 types of coral in the Caribbean region. We have soft coral, that's like for sea fans and those things that wave around when the waves pass by. And then there are stony corals. And especially with the stony corals, those are the reef builders. So they're the ones that are basically producing limestone upon limestone over hundreds and hundreds of years to build up our entire reef system. And what happens is that they have a little, it's called a zooxanthellae, a little bacteria, well, not bacteria, it's an algae that grows within the polyps of the coral. And they photosynthesize. So as we know, photosynthesis is the food for the organism. And what happens in bleaching is that the zooxanthellae is expelled from the coral. So the coral is bleached, it loses the color because it can no longer photosynthesize. And it leaves our corals vulnerable. So that's what's happening with the heat.
But this is rather concerning because from what I understand, we're seeing this taking place even now with La Nina, that event, complete opposite of El Nino, by the way. You know, whereas 10, 15 years ago, you never saw this taking place. So is it just that this event is expediting the process?
The entire system is under strain from our human activities. So as we know, with climate change, there's climate variability, which is the natural change in climate, and then there's climate change, which is the human-caused change in climate because of, you know, us burning fossil fuels, deforestation. We're basically upsetting the natural systems of water, carbon, you know, the cycles. Everything is now going out of control. And so with these El Nino and La Nina effects, it is all just, it's not the way it's supposed to be. Nature did not design so much carbon to be going into the atmosphere at the same time. It can't handle what is happening. And so we're going to have these repercussions where temperatures are going to rise. The carbon in the air is going to have a higher concentration than it was before. And that then trickles down into the effects on the ocean, because as we know, our ocean is our biggest absorption, biggest capacity for keeping that change in check. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have ocean acidification, sea level rise, temperature spikes, and of course, it's going to affect our coral reefs, which is so important for us and our livelihoods because we have tourism, we have fisheries. All of these depend on our coral reefs.
Now, just before we go into more details with respect to that, are there any further effects apart from coral bleaching? For example, would corals suffer from any diseases from such events taking place?
Yes, definitely. And coral diseases not just come about from the natural effect of climate change. It happens from just our like pollution. So everything that is happening to that ocean, it's the same way we're gonna get dengue, Zika, all these other diseases that are coming about that are transmitted by vector-borne diseases. We're gonna have more mosquitoes. It's a similar ripple effect in the ocean. So basically, our corals, our environment, our whole ecosystem is battling that shift. And we, just like any of us, I mean, if we have air pollution, our lungs will most likely get ill. We might suffer from other issues. It's the same with the coral. The coral are living things, so they will tend to get ill.
Tend to get ill, but what about coral mortality?
Yes, so increasing coral mortality basically means that the coral is going to die. Now, with bleaching actually can be reversed where the zooxanthellae will go back into the little polyps and the coral will regenerate. Now, another thing to note is that only the surface of the coral is alive. Okay? Everything deeper down into the stony coral and stuff like that, that is just calcium, and that is where the physical building of the reef happens. Yeah? So it's not like if you cut down a tree and you lose the entire forest. It is that you have these little cups holding the living cells, and then you have like the ground on which they are building. So it's kind of like little workers holding on to their bricks and just building little by little. And once they have bleached, they become more susceptible to dying out or the mortality rate will increase. But it is possible that if the conditions are reversed back to what they need to survive, that the zooxanthellae can return sometimes. But we're not seeing it happening fast enough. We're having more bleaching events happening and more severe bleaching. So if you think about like the total coverage, they look at how much percentage has been bleached. So it's not looking really great because of the temperatures consistently being higher.
So that is something they don't teach you in school anymore with regard to, it's just the top, the tip of the coral that's actually alive. The bottom is just calcium. We always did about coral polyps and calcium carbonate, but they never really tell you that specifically. So that's an interesting piece of information. Even I'm learning for the very first time. But moving forward, as you just said, it is possible for coral bleaching to be reversed. We're not necessarily seeing that happen at the pace we would like to. We're seeing a bleaching occurring more, recoveries taking on a lot longer. Tobago's coral reef, the Boca Reef, actually suffered from two major bleaching events in recent times, 2005, 2010. And it is expected once more to suffer within the next few months. That being said, though, have we seen the Boca Reef recover from the bleaching event that took place in 2010?
So I would specifically say that the IMA, the Institute of Marine Affairs, they've actually launched a lot of coral bleaching monitoring information. So they have like people go out there all the time. They have remote monitoring as well. So it's great to see that at least data is being collected in this space. And that will help us make better decisions in the future on how to protect the reefs. Now, reef protection is really, really difficult because, like we know, the entire ocean is connected. Anything that happens in one part of it is going to affect another. So it's not like you can just put a bubble, put a barrier over the entire reef and hope that it's not going to be bleached. There's nothing like stabilizing the entire ocean. So it is a race against time, either that we lose it or we make some very big decisions about climate on the whole, protecting our region, monitoring our other activities that could be affecting the coral regeneration rate, like, for example, sometimes not blaming anyone, but sometimes when you have activities out there, boats may drop their anchors, damage the reef. We had this campaign back in the 70s where you can go and walk on the reef, pick up your sea fans. I saw a really old video the other day of a marketing campaign for a tourism company in Tobago. So we're still recovering from the actual hard physical damage, far less deep bleaching, in my opinion. And we need stronger legislation, stronger protection, more monitoring, more data to make sure that we can manage the situation going into the future.
Beyond that, what is even more scary is the mere fact that these warnings come 2 months earlier than usually is. So this severe stress caused by heating in the oceans, as we've stressed and we've emphasized this morning, challenging times, especially with how you're seeing it happening sooner, a lot quicker than normal. Now, earlier on you mentioned the impacts upon tourism. You mentioned the impacts even upon the fishing industries. Could you just expand on that, please?
Sure, definitely. So like we know, every human activity depends on the environment. So all of our livelihoods are connected to the natural resources that we have around us. And the thing about coral reefs is that they boast of so much biodiversity. There's so many different animals and plants. And yes, plants, there are underwater plants that are interconnected. And if you lose one part of the system, the entire system can collapse, right? It's similar to like if you have the ridge to reef effect. Everything from the top of a mountain can affect that coral reef. All the runoff, whatever sediments, whatever, anything that changes a large amount. Remember, those corals need a very stable environment. Mm-hmm. And as that time continues and we continue to do things that are abnormal to the natural system, we are then in turn affecting ourselves. So we're not going to see as many fish. Maybe some fish species that we eat might migrate away. It's not something that is unheard of. We may have less top predator species, which is what we basically eat. We might have to depend on different, spots to have our tourism products shown to the public. Might be harder to reach, might need more energy to get there, might be more dangerous. So it affects every single part of our livelihoods that depend in the coastal zone area. Everything from the ridge to reef. It's all just connected, and we're not going to know until it's too late to recover from it.
That is absolutely scary that we're not going to know until it's too late. And I think you mentioned there about even fish that we consume may want to migrate into cooler waters. So then there's also going to be a great risk, a further risk to food security.
Yes. Definitely. So one thing that I notice about Trinidad and Tobago is that our people, most of our people, I'd say, are far removed from our environment. We don't realize how intimately we depend on our environmental resources, how our ocean controls a lot of what happens to us on land. You think you just go to the beach, you spend a day at the beach. But we forget that a lot of our fisherfolk community are out there all the time, risking these changing environmental factors for us to have that thriving fisheries industry. And, it's interesting because we have some of the oldest fisheries legislation in the world. We're not managing our resources as well as we could. There's a lot that still has to be done to protect our natural resources in this country, because at this point, we're just looking at the capitalist view. We're just looking at how are we going to maximize what we have until it's gone. We're not looking at how we're going to make it last into the future.
I think we could have a further debate about political philosophy and its impact on our environment. But Ms. Katrina Cannon-Roberts, that's where we're going to have to conclude this conversation. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Certainly insightful, and I too have learned a lot. And I'm pretty certain that the viewers did as well. So thank you so much. Have a great day. And, in the words of Dory, just keep swimming.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Ms. Katrina Cannon-Roberts, environmental advocate and author, joining me this morning. what is taking place is absolutely scary. What is even more scary is the fact that we may not truly understand its impacts until it's too late. Now, with El Nino taking place, coral bleaching is happening a lot sooner than expected in terms of the warnings have come 2 months earlier than in years gone by. The recovery from coral bleaching, well, that is not happening as fast as we would hope for, as we would want it to. In fact, it's greater coral bleaching effects that have been taking place. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to end it there for now. We're going to take a break. When we return, well, we'll get into another conversation with my second guest for this morning's edition of AM Prime.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital. My next guest I welcome this morning is a young Trinidadian author of poetry who has had his fair share of time reciting poetry around the world. But what is more interesting is what he sees as poetry. Poetry is who we are, and his latest book, What Happens at the Edge of the World, explores Caribbean identity. I'm joined by such author in studio this morning, Mr. Ronaldo Mohammed. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. What does Ronaldo Mohammed define as poetry? What would you describe poetry as? What is poetry to you? Loaded questions, but all along the same lines.
Yeah, that's a really loaded question. Poetry in itself is I would say, the ability to use metaphor to tell stories and convey particular, images, essentially. It is really a very technical way to use language, essentially. But, essentially with regards to poetry, there's a saying, the metaphor is king. So, in terms of writing poetry, that is essentially the basis of poetry, using metaphor to, convey ideas and stories.
But is that what poetry is to you?
Well, at least to me, that is essentially, what it is. It is really an expression of the soul, an expression of one's, being, essentially. That is what is poetic to me.
At what point in your life did you turn to poetry, and why?
So I began writing poetry in my early teens, actually. I've always felt a calling, to this craft, in terms of writing. I really got into it when I was in high school. I remember having a crush on someone, and, I just felt like, poetry was a good way to express those, emotions, etc. But essentially, writing is something that I've always been doing since I was very young. And I just felt a calling to write poetry, especially, like studying early authors, Shakespeare in high school. These things really, pulled me toward, I guess, the richness of language and being able to express oneself in a very unique way, yeah. And
there's I suppose, and I think you also have acknowledged this, that there is a stigma associated with poetry. I mean, even when I was growing up, because I wrote a lot of poetry, I haven't done so in years. The stigma associated with poetry is that it's more of a feminine thing. It's not really manly, and so there's this tendency for people to shy away from that. Yeah, but how do we try to reverse that stigma? Because poetry is a form of therapy, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, I would say so as well. But poetry essentially, helps you see the world in a different way, in a different light. It is really I think, a power in itself, being able to use language in such a rich and unique way, being able to, open people's minds and perspectives on different things. There are so many, brilliant authors that have made, utilize their craft to, change people's views on particular issues, on particular things. And I know there's a stigma associated with poetry, in the sense that they feel as though, poetry is really reserved for, I guess, women, but that is essentially not the case. Poetry is everywhere. Poetry is an expression of who we are, of ourselves, of everyday life, essentially, And, yeah.
You've actually just said something there, power associated with language. Expand on that.
So, poetry takes the mundane and makes it, unique, and could take something that is very plain and ordinary into something and make it very extraordinary. And what this can do essentially is really change your perspective, your views on things. In life, perspective is critical. Perspective is very important, and this is something that I think poetry achieves.
Let's now speak about your new book. I've been reading a bit about you, following a bit of your poetry. What happens at the edge of this world? And Ms. Debbie Jacob in particular saw it fit to quote one line from your very first poem. Hopefully we get into that later on. This land sweet and messy, cruel conundrum of identity. This book, speak to us more about your inspiration behind writing this book, especially when you're focusing on a cruel conundrum of identity.
Okay, so essentially what this book is, what happens at the edge of the world, it is really a book about exiles, right? I cover, a lot of social issues in this book. It's really about marginalized people. The edge of the world is really a metaphor for both a physical and, I guess, intangible space, right? And, throughout the work, I explore people that have been, people that are on the borderline or have been on the borderline, both from a historical point of view and from a contemporary point of view. So some of the, themes in the poem, explore crime and violence, migration, and just our journey also as Caribbean people being exiled from, coming here as exiles, essentially. Our ancestors coming here as exiles, essentially. So that quote, the poem that you quoted there, that is one of the things that, I explored, essentially. And, us being, I guess, exile in terms of history. And that poem in particular is called I Am, and it really explores Caribbean identity. Our ancestors being, brought here over the Atlantic.
I'm curious, how does one go about taking, I suppose, an examination of our history, of our culture, of I suppose, who we were as a Caribbean people, and now link it to who we are as a Caribbean people? You've explored culture, you've explored history, and you're now relating that to crime, to violence, the struggle to survive. How do you go about doing that?
I think everything is interconnected, essentially. But, I mean, I have a background in history, but essentially, it's really just observing the world around me. I tend to read a lot, as a writer. I think that's so critical. Just absorbing, reading content and all these things. And those are the things that really inspired me. Me having a background, I really love history. I really love culture and just learning about, different things, the world, that kind of thing.
You further stated that you want to give people, I'm reading it right here, you've described, I suppose, the Caribbean as a precarious place filled with beauty and treachery.
Yes.
A place most people don't think about when they consider this country. But that line is extremely powerful. Is it that we as Trinbagonians, that we are living in a place that, we're living in one place, but people outside of Trinidad and Tobago are living in another, in the sense that what we view TNT as is not what people outside of TNT see?
To a certain degree, I would say yes, I mean, I guess historically, in terms of Caribbean literature, people would have highlighted the Caribbean space as, this place of beauty and, that kind of thing. right? But, you know, my goal essentially, at least with regards to this particular work, was really to highlight things that people don't usually talk about, you know. Usually even outside, you know, sometimes you might say, well, I mean, you know, we're very popular, you know, on the world stage and that kind of thing, but, you know, there are just certain aspects of, I guess, our country and stuff that, you know, people may not be totally aware of. Even here in Trinidad and Tobago, it's really important to highlight, you know, some of these untold stories here, I guess, you know, to shed light on it and change people's perspective, etc.
Mm-hmm. Is that notion, I'm probably digressing a bit, but is that notion of, you know, you would explore old shows, old movies, even old cartoons, and the Caribbean was associated with this island surrounded by water, you know, the tropical trees, the coconuts, the steel pan, and whatnot. That still exists. But have we now separated ourselves from paradise?
I mean, I wouldn't say so, you know. You see, essentially, you know, life is a very complex thing, you know, and there's beauty in the Caribbean, you know, but in addition to that, as, you know, the quote says, there's also, you know, treachery, etc. And, I mean, it's a really gray area, essentially, you know, and, yeah, I think, yeah, it's important to talk about these things.
Is it that you hope to also create a sense of empathy?
Of course, absolutely, yeah. That was one of my objectives in terms of writing this work. A lot of these stories are very personal, at least to me. A lot of the, you know, things that I explore in this book. So, yeah, that is one of the objectives of shedding light on particular issues in terms of crime and violence. I guess there's also a poem about a, you know, a homeless person in this book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, you are not, you're very much part of the stage now. In fact, you represented TNT at the 40th Poetry Market held in Paris, in France, in June. How did you get to that point, and what was that experience like?
Okay, so in terms of how I got to that point, a few years ago, you know, I think I really started to take, I wouldn't say I started to take poetry seriously, you know, because I've always been, you know, a writer and, you know, writing and stuff. But, you know, back in 2018, I'd linked up with the 2 Cents movement, right? And I actually work with them now as a teaching artist.
Okay.
Right? And at that particular time, we had, you know, writing workshops, writing sessions called Write With Us. And I remember being, you know, going there, interacting with, you know, different poets and just being in that space, you know, and being mentored by, you know, Darren Sandy and some of the other poets, etc. I think that really helped me to improve my pen, improve my craft. And, you know, from since then, it's really been a journey of just, you know, improving and, you know, getting better, etc. And, you know, it's through that, you know, through, you know, mentorship, etc. And, you know, just putting myself out there, you know, taking part in the National Slam, you know, that is something that also helped me to improve my craft. All these things, you know, really came together to really help me produce this work here. You know, so I have to really give credit to the 2 Cents movement, etc. What was the other part of the question?
Well, what was that experience like in France?
In Paris. It was incredible, you know, just being able to share my work with an international audience. Also interacting with other Caribbean poets, young poets. So it was 10 of us in total. Each of us were representing our respective islands. I represented Trinidad and Tobago there. And it was very interesting just seeing how, you know, interconnected we are, you know, in terms of some of even the themes that we explore in our work. It's very similar, you know, and I think it really speaks to, I guess, Caribbean integration, you know, and, you know, it was a really incredible experience, essentially, you know, being able to share my work with people and just interacting with the other poets and just seeing Paris in general. Paris is, you know,
so just before we bid you farewell, there are 2 poems I'd actually like you to recite first now, if you can. And it's the very first poem in your book where this land, sweet and messy, a cruel conundrum of identity. I think you said it's I am. That is the title of the poem, and also the poem about the homeless individual.
Okay.
If you can just, you know, go ahead and recite it first. Right now.
Okay, no
Thank you. This is rather interesting from the aspect that I'm taking a look at Creole identity, linking our history to what we were and who we are now, and possibly where we're going. But Mr. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
And like a waking out of a dream, the old world had ceased. Some were swallowed by the Sargasso Sea, as souls were sold to the merchant ships. We were brought to the new world in shackles. And this world that had been plundered by mariners was reduced to a thing without form and void. And they reduced us to non-beings, things without form and void, a kaleidoscope of shadows. And for years, darkness was upon the face of the deep. We roamed cosmic worlds like guillotine gods, lost, spending lifetimes sifting soil, searching for our severed heads, a scattered identity. We were given new names, written in the braille of cane and cotton fields, unable to find sight of who we were. But time gave birth to new paradigms. We were born in darkness, growing grafted from the parts of a shattered past. Here we are, blooming lost worlds back into existence, an orchard of patchwork culture blossoming in our mouths. Hear the rolling drums in our tongues. It's Carnival Monday years later. We dance a dingole on a street lathered in mud and paint. We paint this landscape colorful. Under a Julie mango-colored sunrise, this land is sweet and messy, a melange of cloven tongues. Identité au bacade tui, Creole conundrum of identity. I watch masqueraders parlance through Port of Spain, like heron gods heralding the rebirth of the world. Their feathers glisten on a glittered road like stars in the Milky Way. And I go back, retrace memory out of the jaws of time, out of the clad iron chains that my ancestors wore, and vain thoughts of race and racism born out of fear. In this moment, I am that I am, and we are what we are, free as it was in the very beginning.
That's a very powerful poem, and I'll tell you what, there were so many things. I think line by line, your mind was just, at least my mind was just popping with so many thoughts. I think a powerful line there alone, it probably was also the most simple in terms of the language, but how you alluded to the sun being like a Julie mango, and this land, it's sweet yet messy. And this is a Creole conundrum of identity. Bloody hell, there's a lot more that we can get into, but go on with your next poem about the homeless individual.
Okay.
Reciting poetry here very early on in the morning, huh? It really calms the mind and soul. Get away from a bit of all the politics and all the heaviness that is happening here in TNT, but also how young people are now exploring who we are. Mr. Mohammed?
Okay, so this is a very short poem. It's called Vagrant in a Summer Suit, and it's actually a golden shovel, so I quoted Don McLean's Starry Night. You know, starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and gray, look out on a summer's day. Outside the cathedral, shadows graze this starry-eyed stranger, whose words wander wild into the night. As loud as a coyote's cry, they paint his tattered mind, while you sit in the safety of your cars with eyes gazing at the palette of city lights dissolving around him in the blue-black darkness of dusk and dust, covering the man whose personhood turns grey. Area, like the outskirts of Port of Spain, you look there at the man marooned and marauding, strung out on the city's periphery, a vagabond who banks on the goodwill of fellow men, and a little luck in his threadbare summer suit, staring mad at passers-by who look and look away each day, never looking close enough to see his soul resurface out its present purgatory, his mind a torn masterpiece, begging to be redeemed.
Mr. Mohammed, as before we bid you farewell, should anybody want a copy of your book, how do they go about acquiring it?
Okay, so it's going to be available on Amazon pretty soon. I'm also going to have a book launch in August. So you guys can follow me on social media, you know, for more information on that. My Instagram is Ronaldo, Ronaldo, 868. And yeah, so we're going to have a book launch in August, and the book is going to be available on Amazon pretty soon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Thank you very much for reciting those 2 poems. And that's just a taste. There's a lot more that you can get into as we look forward for the release of this book from Mr. Ronaldo Mohammed. But go and follow him on social media as he shares his journey with all of us, and we would be able to acquire a copy. But ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we get some more conversations.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices, like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to the program. That book is really interesting, to say the very least. Certainly can't wait to get a hand of a copy to read the other 25 poems. But let's get into some regional updates very quickly while we have the time. Let me start with the island of Grenada. Carnival season in Grenada is intensifying, and the RGPF, the Royal Grenada Police Force, is urging promoters and event planners to obtain the required permits for the use of amplified sounds. Now, we all know the situation with regard to noise pollution here in TNT, and now there just seems to be not just a care in the world about residents, but more so just businesses doing whatever they please. In Grenada, the police are actually urging planners to obtain the permits. A breach of this could result in criminal prosecution and the event being shut down. Here in TNT, events are shut down. Nobody ever pays the price for it except citizens when they simply just can't sleep. Anyway, let's take a look at this report from Grenada.
Grenada anticipates the approval of a celebratory 50 EC dollar note to commemorate its 50th anniversary of independence on February 7th, 2024. In a national address, Prime Minister Honorable Deacon Mitchell said a request was made to the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank for approval of the note. Since assuming office June 2022, the Deacon Mitchell-led administration announced the plans to make the 50th celebration one that will be etched in the minds of even the smallest child for years to come. The celebrations will commence in September 2023 into December 2024.
As we approach this important and privileged milestone, we must once again find that imagination to allow for greater achievement for the next 50 years. I take this opportunity to announce that the Special Select Committee of Persons, led by Dr. Wendy Crawford, and which includes a representative from each parish, have been appointed to organize and manage Grenada's 50th independence celebrations. The celebrations will commence in earnest in September 2023 and will span the entire year of 2024. And as part of our Golden Jubilee, I'm happy to report that Cabinet has approved and made a request to the Eastern Caribbean.
I'm a bit red-faced. I do apologize for that. We played the wrong update for you. I'll have to get that update coming out of Grenada with respect to the noise pollution to share with you a bit later on. But again, I apologize for that because we did update you with respect to the independence celebrations earlier this week. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here for news on the hour, and when we return, we get into more conversations. I suppose we're heading into politics this morning with a focus on Tobago. So we'll be right back after this.
Seven is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, the screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there.
Side women don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day.
Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back $3,000. I promise you. Or promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow name Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
Coming up on Nicole Larson Live. It was in 2018 where something happened.
I got a call. It was his 3rd day. He said, let me tell you what you're going to hear tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to hear that they have found him. He has floated to the top. He would be decomposed. He would be smelling awful. And I'm listening to him on the phone because he is just giving me the cold, hard facts.
Even though it takes time, time alone will not heal. You cannot heal what you do not acknowledge.
The unconscious socializing is what we need to check, because I was just doing it to avoid being home. I don't want to be in the bedroom because it's not the same anymore.
You can be happy, hurting, and healing all at the same time.
I choose to have gratitude. My soul is safe with Christ. I choose to be, yeah, the grateful one.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the Content Capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Well, concluding a preliminary investigation, the Integrity Commission has officially launched a full probe into a leaked voice recording said to be that of 2 high-ranking Tobago House of Assembly officials that was speaking up using public funds in order to fuel a political propaganda campaign. Well, to explore more on this issue, I'm joined by former head of the public service, Mr. Reginald Dumas. He's joining us via telephone this morning. Mr. Dumas, good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing?
Well, holding on. Sun is shining for now.
I'm just wondering if the Tobago House of Assembly is expressing similar sentiments this morning.
expressing what?
Similar sentiments that they too are holding on, trying to survive.
Well, they haven't spoken to me, so I don't know.
Mr. Dumas, what is really going on with this Tobago House of Assembly administration?
Yeah, well, there seem to be a lot of shortfalls, to put it mildly. I don't know. I mean, it's the audio tape, it's the public conflicts between themselves and the central government, and more particularly between the Chief Secretary and the Prime Minister. The number of actions, legal actions being brought or contemplated against them, for all of which I imagine the taxpayer has to pay.
Yes.
So it's not a settled situation at all, and it's not. It's causing a lot of unease in Tobago, to put it mildly. And there's the whole question of the relationship, the overall relationship between Tobago and Trinidad, as to what that relationship is looking like and what it could be. And people are a bit unnerved by what they're confronted with.
Mm-hmm. Well, even you yourself sound very frustrated, Sue, but into this particular matter of the Integrity Commission's investigation...
I'm not hearing you too clearly.
Could you hear me a bit better now?
Hello?
Mr. Dumas, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm asking you this matter with regards to the Integrity Commission's probe. Could you recall any other time where there's both a police investigation, whether it be the fraud squad, as well as an Integrity Commission investigation into the actions of the Tobago House of Assembly?
No, I certainly cannot recall any such thing. I can't recall any occasion on which there was either body investigating, either the police or the Integrity Commission, let alone both simultaneously. So that's what I'm saying. All of this is creating a lot of unease in Tobago. The audio tape was unfortunate. I don't know who recorded the conversation. I don't know who leaked the conversation. I am told that it took place a year ago, but that is irrelevant. The point is what was said and what appeared to be contemplated coming out of the conversation. To have both the police and the Integrity Commission saying simultaneously that they have the authority to investigate and beginning investigations, I mean, is quite remarkable. This is unheard of in my experience, in my recollection. I can't think of any such thing.
Mm-hmm. Given everything that has transpired over the last couple months, which I agree with is rather unfortunate, should we be acting as though we are surprised? I mean, yes, we expected different, and there was a campaign of difference, and we hoped that things would have been different. Should we be surprised at all?
Well, we are surprised. The campaign slogan in 2021 was "Let me fix this," which suggested that things that have been going on with the previous administration were not exactly kosher, to put it mildly, and that you were going to deal with this and to repair all the broken elements that existed, that you said existed. Now comes this, where you have a conversation caught on tape in which two people whose voices appear identifiable, let me put it that way, where two senior members of the Tobago House of Assembly Executive Council are heard talking about how to use government money, taxpayers' money, in order to promote their party's chances and their party's political chances within the island. Now that is not nice, and gives the lie to any campaign slogan about let me fix this, because what are you fixing? If you were saying that the previous people did not behave themselves properly and they used taxpayers' money to the detriment of the people of Tobago, but to your own benefit, how can you now use the same sort of approach and say that you're fixing something? What are you fixing exactly? And then you have people who they are supporters saying, well, everybody does do it. Now, this is remarkable. You talk about a situation which is not good. You vote against a party because you say they're not, they haven't been behaving well. You bring another party in. But because you have brought this other party in and you support this other party, suddenly it becomes all right to do what you were criticizing before and say everybody does do it. What kind of argument is that? Where's the ethical base for such a statement or for such a question? Where? And how does Tobago and by extension Trinidad and Tobago, how do they make progress when you have such an attitude being expressed?
Yes, yes. Well, quite frankly, Mr. Dumas, I don't think there is an ethical base. I don't think that truly exists in the political arena, at least from what we're witnessing taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. But using that, that notion of what you just put forward there, is this in any way at all, in reality, affecting the image of the THA if such arguments are being made that everybody does this?
Well, of course it must affect the image of the THA. You can't just say everybody does it after you have said that you voted the other people out because they used to do it. I mean, this makes no sense. It's totally contradictory and absurd. So naturally, the image of the THA is adversely affected by this. And with all the lawsuits being brought, you know, people suing the EMAs as the THA in court, the former executive chairman of the Studley Park Enterprises Limited has the THA in court, sent them a pre-action protocol letter. I imagine that others, a certain contractor, I don't know whether they've written yet, but they were promising to do so, also to send a pre-action protocol letter, etc., etc. All this places the THA in a most unfortunate situation and doesn't make Tobago look good at all.
Well, just moving forward a bit with regards to the situation that was with the THA chief administrator, this political war of words between the Prime Minister and the Chief Secretary, it seems to have settled now that an administrator has been appointed. But all this time, it took quite some time to actually get this done. Was this political war of words necessary in order to fuel, I suppose, some excuse from both sides for this not being able to get done? In other words, we have to thrash each other's image to justify why the people of Tobago have been, well, I suppose, been treated unfairly.
Well, the political war, if one is following the THA Act and the Constitution, which is the highest law of the land, on the face of it, there would be absolutely no need for such a political war of words. As a matter of fact, again, I don't know that this has ever happened in the past. But this whole thing became politicized because it was felt that this, by one side or the other, that someone was being proposed because he or she could be relied upon to act in a certain way, and so on. So it puts the person who's finally chosen, and someone has been chosen now to act as administrator, chief administrator, puts that person in a very awkward situation, because when you have this public battle between the two sides, as to what was meant and who was put up and why the person was put up or withdrawn or whatever it is. You bring the party politics into the matter, and that is something that you ought not to do when you're dealing with a public servant. It doesn't make life any better, because again there'll be suspicions as to why certain persons were omitted, why certain persons were chosen, etc., and it would be felt that it was being done or has been done on a party political basis. That is very unfortunate, because the public servant is supposed to stay out of all of this. I mean, I have been a public servant myself, so I can tell. I mean, there are times when a minister would tell you, I want you to do such and such, and you say, well, no, I really can't do such and such, because it's against the rules. And the minister will say, well, I am in control here. I'm telling you to do such and such. And you say, well, then, okay, minister, put it down in writing. Put your instruction in writing.
Yes.
At which point, the minister tends to back off. Because the minister knows that what he's asking you to do is not correct.
Yeah.
Of course, the society being what it is, minister will then go about maligning you behind your back. And going to the Prime Minister and saying, I want, this permanent secretary is giving a lot of trouble, and so on. As I had to face when I was head of the public service, where I don't want to go into detail and call any names or anything like this, but where it has happened that I've been asked to remove a certain permanent secretary from the particular ministry because the minister can't work with the permanent secretary. Not because the permanent secretary is doing anything wrong, but because the minister has complained about the permanent secretary.
Yes, yes.
Now you do what you can, but it causes difficulty and bad blood.
I wonder, Mr. Dumas, whether or not such public servants still exist with regard to being able to say no to a minister. Even what you just said, put it in writing, But moving forward, if this is the case, what we're seeing taking place in Tobago, we cannot say for certain that it has politicized the office, but we could suggest the possibilities that it has or will lead to such, and that is the office of the THA Chief Administrator. Now that one has been appointed, there is a possibility that we have politicians acting as public servants.
I hope not, because that would be very much against the law. You see, in these small societies, it's not peculiar to Trinidad and Tobago. You find it throughout the Caribbean, and you find it in small societies generally throughout the world. You have politicians that go about thinking and persuading themselves that they are in control. As a matter of fact, the word control is actually used. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at Section 85, subsection 1 of the Constitution, where there's the relationship between minister and permanent secretary is defined, you will see that the minister is responsible for the direction, the general direction and control of the ministry. And the permanent secretary is responsible for the supervision. It's interesting. I keep telling people this, and it's something I first raised many decades ago with the late George Chambers, and I've raised it with every single prime minister since. But nothing has happened because I think they like it so. The permanent secretary under our Constitution is constitutionally empowered not to manage. You know, we keep hearing about the permanent secretaries don't manage their ministries properly. You show me the word management or manager or manage in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, if we're moving forward now, sir, with this conversation and what is really taking place in Tobago, you've said that what we've seen even with the campaign slogan, that we fix this, so then what it is you're really fixing if we now are making the excuses, well, people did this before, administrations did this before. Is it that this particular administration, however you like to refer to it, Farley Gustin-led, Tobago People's Party-led, former PDP-led, whatever it is being referred to?
Is it not what, sorry?
Whatever this administration is referring to themselves to, whether it be the Farley Gustin-led administration, an ex-PDP administration, a Tobago People's Party administration, is it that they've just proven, is it that they have proven or are proving themselves to be no different to any other administration that has led the THA previously, or any other political party, or any individual that they've campaigned against?
Well, if you compare this administration, and by the way, I'm glad you raised this thing about the Tobago People's Party, because that was supposed to be formed. We heard that there was going to be a Tobago People's Party, and then we heard nothing more about it.
We also heard there was going to be a...
So you have, on the face of it, you have an administration of independence, which is unique in Trinidad and Tobago. It's not against the law. You might have it, you can't have it in the central government. You have to have a party. But in the THA, you can have it, and we do have it. This is an administration of independence. You ask if they're any different from any administration we've gone before. I think they are different. I don't think that you would have found this kind of thing in an administration headed by the late A.N.R. Robinson, for instance. And he was the first chairman, as they called it at the time, chief secretary. That phrase came later in 1996. But when they had the restored THA in 1980, and Robinson was the first chairman, I don't think you would have had this kind of thing, quite frankly. So it's embarrassing, and a lot of people in Tobago are quite frankly embarrassed by what is seen as a slide into areas that ought not to be explored, or that one ought not, that an administration here ought not to get itself in. And it's causing awkwardness. As I say, you have all these lawsuits and letters of pre-action protocol letters and flying about the place, etc., etc. The relationship between the central government and... yes, in the past you've had difficulties between the central government and the THA, for instance, between Robinson and Williams and Chambers, yes. That is true. And the matter even went to court. Robinson even, I remember the first THA Act in 1980, Robinson actually took the government to court and lost. You have had difficulties. You have had difficulties between Ho Choy Charles and Basile Pandey, for instance. But I don't think we've had quite the sort of difficulty that we have been facing in the last few weeks, last month or so, between the THA and the central government. And even where the budget statement is concerned, you know, the THA budget was read a few days ago, and you've had the Minister of Finance subsequently saying that publicly that the THA Chief Secretary, who read the budget as Secretary for Finance, is a stranger to the truth, which is a polite way of saying that he's lying. So, no, we haven't had this kind of thing before, and it's awkward, it's embarrassing. it's not only embarrassing, it's also counterproductive, because I don't see how Tobago benefits from all of this. I hope it can come to an end soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we also heard that there was going to be a reshuffle within the THA. That in itself...
Well, a reshuffle was announced a long time ago. The Chief Secretary said he was going to reshuffle the cabinet by the end of February.
And that
We're now in July.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of things have been said. None of it has actually materialized. And
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all very well to talk and to say you're going to do this and you're going to do that. But has it been done?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
So then the question is Mr. Dumas, what is next? I mean, we've heard suggestions from those in the political arena that Amplia Augustine has proven himself as an individual who cannot keep his promises, who goes against his own word. He should resign. I mean, that came from Watson Duke. We've heard from Ansel Dennis. We've heard from Kelvin Morris. But, you know, what's next?
Well, you expect the political opponents to say that
of course.
They should resign. But let me put it this way. If, I'm speaking purely personally as a non-political person, I don't belong to any political party, if the results of the investigations being carried out by the police and the Integrity Commission indicate clearly that the audio tape shows a violation of the law. In other words, that there was, on the face of it, a conspiracy to commit a corrupt act. If that happens, then it would seem to be that the credibility of the current Tobago House of Assembly will have come to an end. I mean, it's shaky enough at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that the only respectable thing to do would be to return to the polls.
Interesting. Mr. Dumas, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning. I know previously you've actually hesitated with respect to an election in Tobago because we've had conversations before, but the mere fact that you said if anything comes out of this investigation, that suggests...
I don't know that anything will. I can't tell you what.
No, you're absolutely correct.
And the Integrity Commission will do. But because it would appear to me at that point that the THA would have no moral or ethical right to continue without let or hindrance.
Yes. Mr. Dumas, thank you very much for joining me this morning for this conversation, and appreciate to be updated as to exactly what's taking place, even with what is being expressed with regard to a defense about this has other administrations have done it. But as you said, you yourself cannot recall a time where the Integrity Commission as well as the police service are both conducting investigations into something coming from the THA. I can't recall as well. But keep well, sir, and all the very best.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Mr. Reginald Dumas, former head of the Public Service, joining me on AM Prime this morning. And what is really happening with the Tobago House of Assembly, its declining image? We still don't know what's going on with the Tobago People's Party. There still has not been a reshuffle of the secretaries, as stated by Chief Secretary Amplia Augustine. And beyond that now, this investigation from the Integrity Commission, as well as the police service, the image is declining. It has declined, obviously, but it's just going further away. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for AM Prime for this week. Thank you very much for joining me, as always. Wishing you a grand day ahead and an absolutely wonderful weekend. I hope it's a wonderful weekend. May you get some rest, and may you spend some time with your family and loved ones. Enjoy it. But may we all be safe, and thank you very much to all my guests this morning. Until Monday morning at 6 o'clock, bright and early, I'm Keaton Shaw. Do have a great day. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.